Hello and welcome to Newsweek South Asia, a program that exposes Pakistan's role and nexus in promoting global terrorism and its funding. Here are the headlines. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi urges for strong counterterrorism measures. United States warns Pakistan praises India to bring peace. Fourth US serviceman killed in blast in Afghanistan. And experts believe Jammu and Kashmir to be battleground for jihadi movement. Addressing a meeting of BRICS nation leaders on the margin of the G20 summit in Argentina, the Indian Prime Minister vowed to build a strong United Nations counter-terrorism strategy to tackle the growing menace. Newsweek South Asia has a report.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who was in Buenos Aires to participate in the G20 summit, held a trilateral meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese Premier Xi Jinping in Buenos Aires and discussed ways to work towards global peace and counter-terrorism. In the meeting, Prime Minister Modi discussed challenges that the nation was facing because of terrorism, radicalization, and how it was being used to counter the growth of the countries both socially and economically. He even urged the countries to work together against the economic offenders and fugitives who pose a serious threat to the world economic stability.
इसमें कोई संदेह नहीं है कि आज दुनिया असाधारण बदलाव और अनिश्चितता के दौर से गुजर रही है। बढ़ते जियोपॉलिटिकल तनाव ने ग्लोबल गवर्नेंस पर गंभीर दबाव डाला है। मल्टीलेटरलिज्म और रूल बेस्ड इंटरनेशनल ऑर्डर को एक तरफा प्रवृत्तियों या संकुचित समूहों द्वारा तेजी से अलग-थलग किया जा रहा है, जिनका प्रतिकूल प्रभाव हर जगह बड़ी संख्या में लोगों पर पड़ता है। इसे हम नॉन यूएन मैंडेटेड सैंक्शंस और संरक्षणवाद की राजनीति में देख सकते हैं।
Modi urged all countries, including BRICS and G20, to work together in implementing the Financial Action Task Force standards and to strengthen the United Nations counter-terrorism framework to stop terrorist networks, their financing and their movement. It is a known fact that if terror attacks is carried out in India and Afghanistan, the role of Pakistan cannot be ignored in such circumstances. In June this year, the global money laundering and anti-terror financing watchdog, Financial Action Task Force or the FATF, announced in its plenary meeting that Pakistan would again be placed back on its grey list as it had failed to take control of terror financing. Pakistan was earlier placed in the grey list from 2012 to 2015. Prime Minister Modi's statement on combating terrorism assumes significance as China has repeatedly blocked India's attempts at the United Nations Security Council to name Pakistan-based Jaish Mohammad chief Maulana Masood Azhar as a global terrorist.
They all felt that we should work together to steer global economic governance. They felt that the three countries should work together in areas where we could promote peace and stability in regional crises, that we should work together on terrorism, we should work together on disaster relief and humanitarian assistance. And in general, the effort would be not that the cooperation would be directed against anybody, but that the cooperation would be based upon how these three countries, each having their own strengths in the world, could contribute to global good.
This has been seen by many world leaders as another step by the Indian government to expand its idea of globalization, and Prime Minister Modi attempts to bring millions of people out of poverty through equal distribution of resources. The meeting came hours after Modi held talks with Japanese counterpart Shinzo Abe and US President Donald Trump during another trilateral meeting on the sidelines of the G20 summit.
ये एक बहुत बड़ा अच्छा अवसर है कि लोकतांत्रिक मूल्यों को समर्पित अमेरिका, जापान और भारत तीनों मिलकर के विश्व में शांति, समृद्धि और स्थिरता के संबंध में हम मिलकर के क्या भूमिका अदा कर सकते हैं। मेरे लिए खुशी की बात है कि दोनों देश हमारे स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनर रहे हैं, दोनों मेरे अच्छे मित्र रहे। इन तीनों के साथ हमारा मिलकर के काम करना अपने आप में एक सुहाना अवसर है।
Overall, the Indian Prime Minister has once again proved his statesmanship on the world platform by countering the growing menace of terrorism. It now totally depends on China if they want to protect terror groups operating from Pakistan or work together with global leaders to maintain peace and stability in the world.
The United States government, impressed with India's efforts to finish terrorism, has urged Pakistan to follow India's footsteps and even support the policies followed by India. Newsweek South Asia has a report.
The United States Defense Secretary James Mattis gave a strong message to Pakistan, has said that every responsible nation to support the efforts of the UN, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and all those who are trying to maintain peace in South Asia. Mattis asserted that 40 years is enough for every responsible nation to get on board with the South Asian peace process. Earlier, the US President Donald Trump wrote a letter to Prime Minister of Pakistan Imran Khan in which he made clear that Islamabad's assistance was fundamental to the health of the two countries' strained relationship. Trump has requested full support of Pakistan for the US effort to advance the Afghan peace process and for US Special Representative Zalmay Khalilzad's trip to the region.
United States of America has finally woken up to the fact that all along Pakistan has just taken them up the garden path, taken their money and just let them shown them the roses and shown them the flowers, and that is all. Concrete action against the extremists operating from Pakistan territory, the complicity of ISI and the Pakistani army in training and arming these extremists who are now going around in Afghanistan and in India also and creating mayhem.
Jim Mattis continued to praise India's approach towards curbing terrorism in the South Asian region by saying it was time for everyone to get on board, support the United Nations, support Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Afghanistan President Ashraf Ghani, and all those who are trying to maintain peace and the world a better place. Ties between Pakistan and the United States have strained ever since Donald Trump became the president. Last month, Trump said that Pakistan does not do a damn thing for the US, alleging that Islamabad has helped Al-Qaeda chief Osama bin Laden hide near its garrison city of Abbottabad. In September, the Trump administration cancelled $300 million in military aid to Islamabad for not doing enough against terror groups like the Haqqani Network and the Taliban active on its soil.
Americans have come to the conclusion and they have conveyed that look, there is first of all no good terrorist and there is no bad terrorist. A terrorist is a terrorist. This is as per what our Prime Minister Modi was saying all along, and the Indian government has been saying all through these years. That look, Pakistan has this habit of saying that the people who are coming into Kashmir, whom they are aiding and abetting and training in their camps over there in Pakistan occupied Kashmir, they are not terrorists but they are freedom fighters. Now America has now seen through this game and they have told Pakistan that look, you have to stop training, aiding and abetting all these people.
On the other hand, India's Defence Minister Nirmala Sitharaman met James Mattis to discuss high-level security matters, and expectedly, Pakistan is bound to come up. Nirmala Sitharaman, who is on a 5-day visit to the United States to strengthen defence ties between the two nations, was praised by her United States counterpart for tackling terror activities in South Asia. In her remarks with Jim Mattis at the Pentagon, Sitharaman said mutual trust and confidence in defence partnership between the two countries were growing. The defense minister added that she was encouraged by the importance attached to the India-US defense relationship in the new US national security strategy. A strong foundation has been laid for the India-US defense relationship over the years. India sees the US as an important partner in defense, Sitharaman said, adding that the two countries have a good military-to-military cooperation, defense consultations, scientific collaborations, and co-production and co-development and industry collaboration.
This meeting between our defense ministers is going to be very crucial because this will allow interoperability of Indian and American armies. It will also allow a strategic doctrine coming in wherein you will see that America will make policies suited for India to counter China and Pakistan both in this Asia Pacific region. And thirdly, it will also send a very strong message to Pakistan and China that look, now you cannot really take India for granted, because the way China is also trying to take India for granted and being a pushover, the days are gone by.
The recent meetings between the two countries, Sitharaman said, have underscored their mutual desire to move positively. The high-level exchanges are an indication of the depth and the quality of bilateral ties, as well as their mutual desire to work closely on a range of regional and global issues, she added. Overall, Sitharaman appreciated the responsiveness of the Trump administration to India's terror problems.
US service members who were wounded in an IED blast in Ghazni last month saw another victim succumb to his injuries. The attack killed 3 other soldiers and has led to many questions being raised on the security situation in the war-torn country. Newsweek South Asia has a report.
Army Sergeant Jason Michelle McClary, 24, from Export, Pennsylvania, died in Landstuhl, Germany, where he was being treated following an improvised explosive device or IED attack in Ghazni city in Afghanistan. 3 others, Army Captain Andrew Patrick Ross, Army Sergeant First Class Eric Michael Amond, and Air Force Staff Sergeant Dylan J. Elchin, were killed when their vehicle was attacked. McClary was assigned to 1st Battalion, 38th Infantry Regiment, 1st Stryker Brigade Combat Team, 4th Infantry Division, Fort Carson. The Taliban has claimed responsibility for the attack, which is now being called as the deadliest against US service members in Afghanistan.
You see, I think the United States is trying to take a realistic approach. It wants to disengage from Afghanistan, but given the present status of the Afghan armed forces and the resurgence of the Taliban, they feel that unless the Taliban are brought on board, sustainable peace in Afghanistan will be practically impossible to attain. So they don't want a situation as in Vietnam, the moment they left, that the entire government collapsed. I don't think that's going to happen. What will happen is basically Afghanistan relapsing back into the civil war that you saw from 1992 to 96 before the Taliban took over. So realism, basically, it seems their failures on the ground and realism have forced the Americans to take a posture which involves talking to the Taliban.
In recent weeks, the Taliban has been resurgent near Ghazni, prompting the US to send additional troops into the region to help Afghan forces. US General Scott Miller, the head of US and NATO forces in Afghanistan, was photographed earlier this month carrying a fully loaded M4 carbine assault rifle while visiting Ghazni. The role of Pakistan in these attacks cannot be ignored as it continues to provide support to terror groups active in Afghanistan. This terror outfit, which have been causing mayhem in the state of Afghanistan, have a strong connection with neighboring Pakistan. Pakistan has been accused by the Afghan authorities for being the state which provides resources, training and weapons to carry out attacks to destabilize Afghanistan.
I think it is fairly known that Pakistan has a huge role to play in the spreading of terrorism in Afghanistan. Pakistan does not deny it in so many words. You see, and Americans know it. Americans officials have testified before their bodies as to role played by Pakistan in holding up the Taliban. There is material aid, there is strategic help, there is sanctuary being offered to the Taliban. You name it, Pakistan does it for the Taliban.
Former Afghan President Hamid Karzai said he sees Afghanistan in a highly sensitive stage of their history, asking the Afghan people to take care of the recent peace efforts initiated by the US. Karzai went on to say that the peace process should be carried out in front of the eyes of the Afghan people and not in secret.
ما کاملا تفکیک ازیر میکنیم که صلح افغانستان چیست و معامله بین امریکا و پاکستان چیست. از این معامله‌های بیرونی بوده که مملکت ما بدبخت شده.
Taliban are not trying to persuade public opinion in Afghanistan about how good or bad they are. They are ideologically driven by Islamic fundamentalism. They believe they have the sanction of God and they want to take over entire Afghanistan, period. While doing so, they do not want people in the uncontrolled areas, that is uncontrolled by Taliban, those areas to have any bad feelings or bad opinions about the Taliban. So this is not an argument that they will reveal in public, but their stance so far has been, let the Americans leave Afghanistan. They believe if the Americans leave Afghanistan, there will be no problem in Afghanistan. So it's a wise move or a wise statement by Hamid Karzai, where he is trying to outline, let the people of Afghanistan know what the Taliban is all about. But it is also sterile wisdom, because the Taliban right at this point in time is not intent on revealing its cards.
Karzai also suggested that the Afghan government should designate a national peace delegation to conduct the peace talks with the Taliban. He said that the US and Russia should coordinate their peace efforts.
Terrorism in South Asia was one of the topics discussed during a conference in the Netherlands, and it saw many experts throw light on how Pakistan has been radicalizing youth. Newsweek South Asia has a report.
Recently, the European Foundation for South Asian Studies, EFSAS, organized a day-long seminar titled Terrorism in South Asia at the VU University in Amsterdam. The conference was moderated by Joris van Wijik, a professor at VU, and comprised of 4 speakers including Dorothy van Dame, Paul Stott, Daniel D. Paulis and Junaid Qureshi, who is the director of EFSAS. Stott, who is the lecturer at the University of Leicester, examined the links between jihadism in Great Britain, Belgium, Netherlands, Pakistan and Afghanistan. He took the example of a British health practitioner of Pakistani origins, Mirza Ali, who travelled to Pakistan to fight for the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan Jamaatul Ahrar (TTPJA) to prove that extremist groups targeted disenfranchised vulnerable young men, often first or second generation migrants in the Western countries, for recruitment. Stott pointed out that there was ample evidence to demonstrate that Pakistan took center stage in terms of jihadism in the West, which made former British Prime Minister Gordon Brown say in 2008 that 75% of UK terrorist plots originate in Pakistan.
Particular examples I was speaking about focus very much on the period from the early 90s onwards to probably the period before the Syrian Jihad, where there was a great deal of interaction between British jihadi groups and those in Kashmir, those in Pakistan, those in Afghanistan, and you even see, for example, a group of Britons, Al-Maharoon, calling themselves or setting up a Sharia for Pakistan.
The next speaker, Dorothy van Dame, from the University of Leuven, in order to substantiate her theoretical framework, Van Dame demonstrated how the Pakistani identity is far from homogeneous, thus creating tensions and conflicts between the different ethnic groups which feel disenfranchised, rejected and humiliated by the Pakistani state, as argued that the state particularly benefits and favors those living in the Punjab province. Therefore, seeing those feeling of perceived social injustice triggered by the state, many radical groups across the country, especially in the rural and remote areas, have started preying upon and recruiting vulnerable individuals and luring them into joining their corrupt cause.
The subject of terrorism in South Asia is not something that's very much front page, especially in Western Europe today, but it should be. It should be discussed and it should be debated because it's extremely relevant. And what we have seen in the panel is that it's not only relevant for the region, it's also relevant for us here. And some panelists made the connection with some events that have been happening in Europe and the terrorist networks in Europe. But it's also important to focus on the region, on the South Asian region, because it's home to billions, should I say, of people, and it is a very tense and conflictual region. So we need to worry about it. It is right next to China. It is surrounded by 3 nuclear powers, 4 if you count Russia, which is not that far away. So we should really address this question of terrorism in South Asia as a crucial issue in today's contemporary affairs.
Van Dame gave the example of the terrorist group Lashkar-e-Toiba, which has been allegedly used by the army as a strategic asset in its proxy war with India, while Pakistan continues fighting against the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which imposes risks on its own integrity. Director of EFSAS, Junaid Qureshi, then talked about terrorism and radicalization taking place in Jammu and Kashmir. He mentioned that the violent extremism became a reality in the region of Jammu and Kashmir in 1947 during the partition of British India, when the newly created state of Pakistan invaded Jammu and Kashmir, and still 70 years after, the people of Jammu and Kashmir are suffering heavily from it. Qureshi explained how terrorism has changed the makeup of the Kashmir conflict since once the gun started ruling. The conflict has lost any of its legitimacy, demands for justice and credibility in the eyes of the international community. He argued that in order to address political issues, it is of utmost importance that terrorism should be brought to a complete halt. Pakistan, a country ruled by fundamentalism and terrorism, remains engrossed in activities that do not have any place in the modern world. Such an environment does not regard democracy as means to serve people. In the past 3 decades, it has continued to sponsor an infiltration in the Kashmir Valley in India in hopes of brainwashing and provoking locals. With the passage of time, the locals have understood the true face of Pakistan and have turned against the malicious plots against Kashmiris.
And with that, we come to the end of this edition of Newsweek South Asia. We will be back next week with more news, views and analysis from the subcontinent. Meanwhile, do keep writing to us at nwsa@anin.com. This is Surbhi Sharma signing off on the behalf of entire production team of Newsweek South Asia. Goodbye and take care.